The rise of the Nazi Army is one of the most defining chapters in 20th-century history, symbolizing both the might and the horror of militarized nationalism under totalitarian rule. Its origins are deeply tied to the end of the First World War and the humiliation Germany suffered under the Treaty of Versailles. In 1919, the once mighty German Empire lay defeated, stripped of its colonies, its army limited to 100,000 men, and its people burdened with enormous reparations. Amid this chaos and resentment, the seeds of Nazism took root. The military, though reduced in size, remained a powerful institution in the minds of many Germans, and the dream of national restoration never truly died. When Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party emerged in the early 1920s, they capitalized on this wounded pride, promising to rebuild Germany's strength and destroy the treaty that had brought it low. The Nazi Army did not begin as a single institution but evolved through the gradual militarization of German society. In the early years, during the Weimar Republic, paramilitary groups such as the Freikorps and the Sturmabteilung, known as the SA or Brownshirts, played a crucial role in enforcing Nazi power. These men, many of whom were unemployed veterans from the Great War, brought military discipline, violence, and loyalty to Hitler's movement. They fought street battles against communist militias, intimidated political rivals, and created an atmosphere of fear that helped the Nazis rise. Yet the real transformation began after Hitler became Chancellor in January 1933. Once in power, he quickly sought to align the military with his regime, promising rearmament and the restoration of German greatness. In 1934, Hitler moved to consolidate absolute control. The Night of the Long Knives marked a bloody turning point. The SA, which had grown too powerful under Ernst Röhm, was purged by Hitler's orders. In its place, the Schutzstaffel, or SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, rose to prominence as the elite force of the Nazi state. The traditional army, known as the Reichswehr, swore an oath of personal loyalty to Hitler, not to the German state. This symbolic act transformed the military from a national defense institution into the personal army of the Führer. From that moment onward, the German armed forces, renamed the Wehrmacht in 1935, became an instrument of Nazi ideology and aggression. Hitler's vision of the army was built on speed, discipline, and technological innovation. The restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles had forced Germany to be creative. Under General Hans von Seeckt and later figures such as Werner von Blomberg and Heinz Guderian, German strategists secretly developed new doctrines that emphasized mobility, mechanization, and combined arms tactics. When Hitler announced the reintroduction of conscription in 1935 and openly violated the treaty, the world watched but did not act. The Wehrmacht rapidly expanded, integrating the army here, the Air Force Luftwaffe, and the Navy Kriegsmarine into a formidable war machine. By the late 1930s, Germany had one of the most advanced military forces in the world, driven by a fanatic belief in racial superiority and national destiny. The Nazi Army's first tests came before the outbreak of global war. In 1936, German troops marched into the demilitarized Rhineland, a direct violation of international agreements. The French and British governments, unwilling to risk another war, did nothing. Emboldened, Hitler continued his aggressive expansion, annexing Austria in 1938 during the Anschluss and then demanding the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. Once again, Europe's democracies appeased him, hoping to preserve peace. The Wehrmacht's prestige grew as it achieved these bloodless victories. Soldiers saw themselves as heroes restoring Germany's rightful place in the world, while the Nazi leadership used these successes to justify further ambitions. In September 1939, the Nazi Army launched its first major campaign, an invasion of Poland that ignited the Second World War. The campaign demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Using fast-moving tanks, motorized infantry, and coordinated air strikes, the Wehrmacht overwhelmed Polish defenses in weeks. Britain and France declared war, but by then Poland was already being divided between Germany and the Soviet Union. The Wehrmacht's confidence soared. The old humiliation of 1918 seemed erased, replaced by a new sense of invincibility. The following years witnessed the height of the Nazi Army's power. In 1940, the Wehrmacht conquered Denmark and Norway, then turned westward, crushing France in a stunning 6-week campaign. The Maginot Line, long thought impregnable, was bypassed through the Ardennes forest. The fall of Paris shocked the world. Hitler stood triumphant in the French capital, while German soldiers paraded through the Champs-Élysées. The Blitzkrieg had rewritten the rules of modern warfare. The Nazi army appeared unstoppable, its troops disciplined, efficient, and motivated by ideology and loyalty to their Führer. However, the same arrogance that fueled their victories also sowed the seeds of destruction. The Nazi regime viewed war not merely as a political struggle but as a racial one. The army became an agent of genocide. In the East, the Wehrmacht fought alongside the SS in implementing Hitler's vision of Lebensraum, living space for the Aryan race. Millions of Jews, Slavs, and other civilians were massacred, starved, or deported to concentration camps. While the SS was directly responsible for much of the organized killing, the regular army often cooperated or turned a blind eye. Orders from the high command, such as the Commissar Order, instructed soldiers to execute Soviet political officers and civilians without mercy. The Nazi army was thus not only a tool of conquest but also an accomplice in crimes against humanity. In 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, targeting the Soviet Union. Nearly 4 million German and Axis soldiers crossed the border, believing they would destroy the Red Army within months. The Wehrmacht advanced rapidly, encircling entire Soviet divisions and capturing vast territories. But as the front stretched thousands of kilometers and winter set in, the Nazi army faced its first real limits. The soldiers, unprepared for the brutal cold and the resilience of Soviet defenders, began to falter. At Moscow in December 1941, the German advance was stopped for the first time. For many soldiers, the illusion of invincibility was shattered. The Eastern Front became a nightmare of attrition and suffering. Battles like Stalingrad in 1942-43 marked the turning point of the war. The Sixth Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, found itself trapped in the ruins of the city after months of intense street fighting. Cut off and starving, they surrendered in February 1943. Over 300,000 German soldiers were lost, and the myth of the unbeatable Wehrmacht died with them. From then on, the Nazi army fought a desperate defensive war. As Soviet forces pushed west and the Allies invaded North Africa and later Italy, the Wehrmacht was stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts. In 1944, the Allies landed in Normandy. The Western Front opened, and the once dominant German military now faced overwhelming industrial and numerical superiority. Despite remarkable tactical skill and fierce resistance, the Nazi army could not stem the tide. Cities were bombed to rubble, supply lines collapsed, and morale plummeted. Desertions increased, and even Hitler's most loyal generals began to doubt victory. Still, Hitler refused to surrender, ordering hopeless counterattacks like the Battle of the Bulge. The army's remnants fought on fanatically, driven by fear, propaganda, and indoctrination. As the war drew to its catastrophic end in 1945, the Nazi army was a shadow of its former self. The once proud Wehrmacht was reduced to a collection of exhausted divisions defending the ruins of a dying Reich. In April, Soviet troops surrounded Berlin. Hitler, hiding in his bunker, issued impossible orders to armies that no longer existed. On April 30, he committed suicide, and a week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war had left Europe in ruins and had cost tens of millions of lives. The Nazi army, which had once stood as a symbol of power and pride, became forever associated with devastation, cruelty, and genocide. In the aftermath of the war, the Allies disbanded the Wehrmacht and held its leaders accountable during the Nuremberg trials. Many generals claimed they were merely soldiers following orders, insisting that the crimes were committed by the SS alone. However, historians later revealed that the Wehrmacht had been deeply complicit in the atrocities. From mass shootings in Eastern Europe to the starvation of prisoners of war, the army had often acted as both executioner and enabler. The myth of the clean Wehrmacht crumbled under the weight of evidence. The legacy of the Nazi army remains one of the most complex and troubling aspects of modern history. On one hand, it represented a highly disciplined and technically advanced military force that revolutionized warfare through tactics, logistics, and mechanization. On the other, it embodied the dark potential of obedience without morality. The Wehrmacht's professionalism could not erase the fact that it served a genocidal regime. Soldiers who once prided themselves on honor found themselves part of a system that dehumanized entire populations. The moral collapse of the army reflected the moral collapse of Nazi Germany itself. In post-war Germany, the process of rebuilding a new military force was cautious and deliberate. The Bundeswehr, founded in 1955, was established under democratic control, with strict adherence to civilian oversight and human rights. Its creation represented a conscious rejection of the militarism that had defined the Nazi era. The memory of the Wehrmacht, meanwhile, continued to spark debates for decades. Some Germans remembered the soldiers as patriots defending their homeland, others saw them as willing participants in tyranny. Museums, memorials, and educational programs sought to confront the past honestly, ensuring that the lessons of the Nazi army would never be forgotten. Today, the story of the Nazi army serves as a warning to future generations. It demonstrates how nationalism, when fused with ideology and unchecked authority, can transform a nation's military into an engine of destruction. The Wehrmacht's rise and fall remind us that military strength without moral restraint leads only to tragedy. Its soldiers, once hailed as the pride of Germany, became instruments of its downfall. Their victories brought only temporary glory, their obedience brought ruin, and their silence allowed crimes that scarred humanity forever. The Nazi army was not born evil, but it became so through choices made by leaders who sought domination and by soldiers who chose loyalty over conscience. It is a story of ambition, power, and betrayal, of a nation that worshipped strength and forgot compassion. And in remembering it, the world reaffirms a vital truth, that true strength lies not in conquest, but in justice, freedom, and humanity.